folks, Michael again from Planet All, and thank you for joining me for the next installment of our Growee Pro series. We are getting really close to the ultimate goal of anybody who's growing hydroponically, getting plants in the system. Everything's going great in our germinator, so now is the time to flush out that tap water from our system and get the water we want. In my setup, I'm using RODI water. So RODI stands for reverse osmosis deionized water. It's basically a set of filters that really get all the tiny little bits in the water out that we don't want there. Once we have the system flooded with RODI water, we're going to finish initializing the Growy so we can start managing the water. So this will be our nutrients as well as our pH levels, all managed by the Growy HydroMaster, so we can be a little bit hands-off. And the steps are pretty simple, but they're important to get right the first time, because that's what sets you up for much higher yield, regardless of what you're growing in your tent. So let's head over to the tent. We're going to transfer out the water, get the stuff in there that we want, and then we're going to take a moment to sit down inside the Growy app and get the last few details all sorted. Okay, we're back tent side, and it's time to change out the water. We've had the system here running for a couple days, just with tap water. Remember, this is washing out the system, making sure we get all the little flakes and things out. First order of business, we're going to take a piece of cheesecloth, or honestly whatever you have handy, and we want to skim through the water. We want to make sure that any little particles and stuff, little bits of plastic from cutting the holes or from cleaning up the edges, all gets out. It's not super critical that you do this. I just like keeping a really tidy system, and cheesecloth is easy. I keep a little scrap of this around, and it just makes it very easy, kind of get little bits of gunk up. Second order of business, pumping out the tap water before we fill it with reverse osmosis water. I use a transfer pump. You absolutely can use hand pumps. There's hand transfer pumps. In a system this size, you're going to be there for a very long time. So I just have a very inexpensive transfer pump here. This one's made by Vivor. I think it cost me about $25. The one thing that actually cost a little bit more than the pump was the hosing. So it comes with hose, just a regular piece of hose like you'd expect for a garden hose. It's kind of rigid, stiff, has the threadings to mount right on there. Those are standard hose threads. I bought this stuff. So this is 3/4 inch hose that's designed for home brewing setups. The nice thing is it is super flexible, and it makes it much easier to pack this away when I'm done. It goes into a tinier space, and also there's less risk of the hoses kind of popping out, because there's a fair amount of force generated by this. So if you pop out a hose on, well, hopefully not the discharge side, because that's going to just water everywhere. Or if it pops out of where you're drawing your water from, you can actually run the pump dry, and that's really bad for the pump itself. So I like to go ahead and stick the hose into the water and into one of those little transition pipes that go between my buckets. It helps secure it in place. It also keeps the hose at a relatively low point, because it's going to be really hard to get 100% of the water out of our system. But we can get into the high 90% by making sure that we keep the hose low and we're drawing off as much as we can. Next order of business, need an extension cord. These don't typically have switches on them, and a lot of times the cord's not all that long. So at least have an extension cord with you, because you're going to need to plug and unplug this to power it on and off, especially if you have to reposition the hose. But you may want to consider a foot switch. Now, mine just died, so I got to get a new one. Can't show it off today. But on Amazon and a number of other places, you can get inline foot switches. So in that case, you'd take the power end from your pump itself, plug it in one side, and then run the extension out. The foot switch allows you to power it on and off while you're holding onto hoses or whatever you need to. Just be careful. If you select one of these, some of them are designed for grinding tools. So they work more like a gas pedal, where if you push it a little, it just runs a little. If you push it all the way down, it runs full tilt. That really doesn't work all that great with some pumps. So I prefer sticking with the less expensive ones that are just an on-off switch. It makes it a lot easier to handle things, gives you that extra reach you need for your cord, and at the same time, you're just kind of streamlining your process, and that's part of hydroponics. We're trying to take a lot of the labor out of maintaining a garden. All right, so let's get everything set up. I already have my hose fed into here. I'm going to put the other end of it into my sink line over here, so it's going straight into my drains. And we're going to pump out as much water as we can. And you'll see the water line dropping. I've already got it run all the way in here. And then we're going to take this out and get really nice and low as we're getting past the point of where the connecting drains are. Okay, so I've stopped the pump for a little bit and you can see there's still water coming through. The water is going to be leveling from across all of the buckets here and just kind of equalizing out, and then we can suck up a little bit more. Okay, as you can see, all of my buckets are quite empty now. There's probably a couple millimeters of water in the bottom, but not much. And the same is true for my reservoir as well. So now we need to start refilling things. Now, if you're following my example and you're having a holding tank for your RODI water, you might want a separate pump. This is just a submersible pump. A lot of times these are used for like clearing out pool covers or areas where water accumulates and you just need to move it kind of thing. They draw in through the bottom and they eject out through the hose. I like keeping a separate pump specifically for transferring my new water that's not nutriated or anything, just straight out of my RODI filter, because you can build up stuff inside the working parts of your pump. So I have one pump, that Vivor one, that we use to transfer out water. That's only for heading out of the system. This one is only for heading in. It's not terribly expensive. I think this was $19. It's very fast. I think it's rated at 400 gallons per minute. So you're going to transfer into a system in, less than a minute filling it. So you have to be a little bit careful timing wise, but that way down the road, if we're changing out water from a working system that has roots, and so the plants are depositing as well as drawing from it, there's going to be sediment, there's biological matter. This one stays clean, so I know my water going in is always clean. The other one, if it gets a little bumps and bits of stuff in it, it really doesn't matter because it's only pulling out of my system. It's only disposing of the consumed water that we're refreshing. Okay, so this is where the next step happens. I keep a reservoir tank here, and it's connected into a line from my RODI system because RODI systems are very slow. So that's about 25 gallons of fresh RODI water there. You can see my little float valve that controls it. That tops up as it needs to because water changes don't happen that often. But if you did a water change purely from the line of your RODI filter, you could dry out your roots. So its transfer pump has been connected and it's coming over next door to the reservoir. And just, hose of it in there, gonna plug it into power and fill it up. You may need to start and stop a couple times because this is going to be pumping water faster than your system tends to equalize. But once you're up above the height of the pump that distributes your water out through your feed line, you can plug it back in and that'll help the system fill faster. All right, let's get going. Now, a great way to tell if you're ready to kick in your circulation pump is to watch your hoses here that are running between bucket to bucket. So bucket 4 and bucket 1 are going to be the ones that start filling the first from your reservoir because they're connected first. I wait until all 4 of them look like they're equally flowing, and this really does not take very much time. Sometimes I'll even wait until I'm over the top edge of the bulkhead because I know for sure I've got plenty of water in there. Then I can kick in the circulation pump, and that will accelerate the process of filling from the reservoir that's topping up from my holding tank. Okay, so how do you know when your system's full? Well, there's a few different ways. I tend to take what I feel is the easiest method, but you may find a different rhythm for yourself that works really well. I wait until not only are my tanks for each plant ready and they look full, but also I check the float valve in my reservoir. So the float valve, when we did all the drilling, was already preset to the height that I want my water at. And that's based on how far you want the bottom of your basket and your roots to be in proximity to the water, and that's that 1 to 2 inches that we try to observe there. So I'll get everything filling, looks pretty good, then I'll turn off the pump that's going from my holding tank with the RODI water into my reservoir and see if the float valve is still spraying water from it. If it looks like it's really close but still kind of going along and filling a little bit, I'll stop there because it's all RODI water. So I just want it to kind of come up, top off. I try not overfill. It's a little bit more of a pain in the butt to precisely pull out a certain amount of water to make sure that you are down to the level you want versus get really close with your transfer pump and then kick back and let the float valve in your reservoir take care of the last couple gallons or so. All right, everything is topped up. Next step is we're going to go in and we're going to set up the Growee so it starts nutriating and balancing our pH. We'll let that run for a bit, and then we're going to check out those seedlings and get them in place. Okay, here we are. We are looking at the Growee inside the app, and it's time to get everything set up so it can start nutriating our water, managing the EC, and managing our pH levels. So what you're seeing right here is my water as it is at this particular moment. And these values, once we have everything set up, are going to update and change over the course of the next couple hours and then be constantly monitored by the Growee. So our first order of business here is to deal with that nutrients card. So you can see the little gray dot in the top right-hand corner of both the nutrients and the pH level cards. The gray dot indicates that it's not being managed right now. So we need to set that up. Go ahead and tap on the nutrient card. And we've got a fair amount to set up here. First order of business, we want to go in and name each of our nutrients so we know exactly what it is we're manipulating. It's a pretty easy process. A little toggle on the right-hand side. If you tap it, we'll turn it on, and you can go ahead and enter the name. In my case, pump A is running my Flora Grow. And then pump B is my Flora Bloom. Now, it's worth pointing out here, you can only enter so many characters. So if I put the M of Flora Bloom in there, it's not going to enter. Just go ahead and abbreviate your names as you prefer. All right, pump C in my system is the Flora Micro. And then last but not least, CalMag. All right. Now, before we start filling in that next column where it says amounts in milliliters, we need to talk about the middle field that says all amounts per. Now, when you're entering your values in the amount of milliliters column, you are limited to in a range of entry. You can put 1 or 50 as your numerals in there. Now, depending on the size of your system and the dosing chart from the manufacturer of your nutrients, you may need a fractional number in there or something larger than 50. The way we manage this inside the app is the all amounts per field. So if you tap on that, its default is 1 liter, but I know in my case, I have at least in my CalMag, I'm going to need a value over 50 if it was set to 1 liter. So just like in middle school math, just move the decimal point. Change that 1 liter to 10 liters, or if you have a different system and you need to go further, 100 liters is an option. And now, in the case I was using CalMag as my example here, instead of having to put in 68 milliliters, I can put in 6.8. So this is one of those things where you need to coordinate looking at what your manufacturer says is needed in terms of proper nutrients, and then knowing that you can either enter a 1 all the way up to a 50 in that amounts per field, changing your unit in the middle there. All right, so we have our nutrients named, our volumes entered. Now let's go ahead and update the EC range. So we are going to be giving it a relatively large range of 0.8 to 1.2. Now, the reasoning for giving it a range is plants are dynamic. depending on what's being grown at what phase, they're going to need a little more or a little less of something at any one moment. Here, if we give it a range, the plants become a dynamic part of the system. They demand a little bit more, a little bit less of something. It gives some negotiation space, and the Grow is going to keep maintaining within that range, versus if we make our range too small, then you might actually end up with larger value swings in terms of what's really in your water. Okay, so everything's entered. It all looks good. Hit save and start dosing, and then confirm by hitting apply. Okay, now if we go back to our dashboard here, you will see a little green dot up in nutrients. All right, let's go ahead and set up pH. And right now it has a default in here of 5.4 to 5.8. I actually want 5.6 to 6.2. And the idea here of this range is very similar to why we give an EC range. One, we don't want the system making changes the moment something's slightly different. Also, pH directly affects how and when your plants absorb certain nutrients. Just because one nutrient is absorbed really well at 5.6 does not mean that all nutrients are. In fact, there is a very real, and sometimes in the case of certain plants, very big range. For what I'm growing, a pH range of 5.6 to 6.2 has served me very, very well. Again, this is a really good place to read up on what your nutrient manufacturer recommends for certain plants, and then also just keeping really good notes. So if something underperforms in one grow, you can go back, make a different decision in your setup the next time. Okay, hit activate, and again, confirm by hitting apply. And now as we go back to the dashboard, we've got that little purple dot. Everything is up and running. It's going to take a little bit of time for this to totally update. In the case of the example we're running here, we have about 65 liters of water. The Growy is going to slowly nutrient and raise up that EC level to our desired range, as well as adjust our pH accordingly. And that's pretty much it for the setup. I do always have my system up and running at least 24 hours before I put seedlings in. Seedling roots are very fragile, and so if the system is adjusting as we put them in, there's a little bit of a higher risk of damaging the roots on our seedlings. Well, there you have it. Not a very difficult thing to do at all. And all of this work we're doing up front is what's going to make the entire process down the road a lot easier. So please comment below. I love getting to interact with folks and answer any questions you may have. And don't forget to visit our sponsor, Growee. They've got a lot of great information on their webpage. There's a link below, and they have a newsletter. And if you sign up for that newsletter, you're going to get a 5% off coupon if you choose to purchase a Growee setup. As always, in the notes below, you're going to find links to everything I'm using in these videos. Anytime you use a link in my description, I may earn a small commission, and it really does go a long way to helping me produce additional videos down the road. Don't forget, also in those links below is the link to Muckles Incorporated, who's helping us out with making garb with the Plant It All logo on it. Go ahead, check out. Maybe you want that nice hockey hoodie or a t-shirt or a hat. Just like the other links, it really does go a long way to helping me produce more valuable content to help you as you get into your own hydroponic growing. All right, until the next video, make sure you're having fun, staying safe, and plant it all.